Friday here on the Locked On Network, and I have some big-time thoughts about the big-time decision that is awaiting the Miami Dolphins this winter.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, we had a transaction at tight end. We're going to talk about that. Several of you tweeted me as soon as it was announced. Talk about what maybe the other shoe is to drop on that regard. The Dolphins have to make a 53-man roster decision because they've opened up a space on the 53-man roster. I would suspect it's a practice squad elevation. We'll talk about the candidates. The start of a monumental window, it's upon us as the first week of November comes to a close. We'll talk about that as well. But I want to start with a portion of the conversation that I think we're all preparing ourselves to have and educate ourselves as we best possibly can on what I think has the potential to be the legacy-defining decision for Stephen Ross. Steve bought the majority of this team in 2009. It's been 15 plus years. And in that stretch of time, there's been big fish pursuits at head coach, many of them not executed particularly well because in the case of Sean Payton, you got docked along with the tampering charges with Tom Brady. But then even going back to the early chapters of Steve's ownership of the team, and Tony Sparano's the coach, and you get on your helicopter and you fly to California to talk to Jim Harbaugh, and then it gets out that you talked to Jim Harbaugh, but Tony Sparano was still your head coach. That didn't end well. Tony gets a contract extension and doesn't make it through the next year. Right? There's been some frustrations in that regard. And then the general manager position has been this evolution of Jeff Ireland's here. We want to give Jeff Ireland time. There's a lot of infighting with Jeff Ireland where a lot of our people are very clearly not on the same page. Don Aponte is serving as the referee between Jeff Ireland and Tony Sparano, and then Joe Philbin and Jeff Ireland. And then the transition after Jeff Ireland leaves is, well, you couldn't really get anybody of your short list to take the job. You have Dennis Hickey, comes in for a year. And then you elevate Chris Grier to the title, but he's working under/alongside Mike Tannenbaum. Then Mike Tannenbaum's phased out. It's Chris Grier, and that's been it, right? And I think about this decision that's about to be made and the magnitude that's involved in it. And Omar Kelly wrote a piece this week about potential legends, bringing legends into the fold of the franchise. And I know Joe Rose and Kim Bokamper talked about it on the Joe Rose show yesterday. And I don't know that the names that are invoked are the right names to invoke, but I agree with a general principle that comes from the common thread of both. And Omar's story was centered on Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas, and one of them being an executive level member of the front office, not the GM per se, but somebody that's been around greatness in South Florida. And then Joe Rose and Kim Bokamper talked about, obviously the Dolphins tried this with Dan Marino back in like 2004. I'm not going to read the story from Omar, but I do want to read one sentence from the story from Omar. What the Dolphins need is leadership, a template, and where better to find it than the players who have actually led the franchise during its last successful period. This is a big thing for me as I think about who you're going to bring in here to run the football operation. in a perfect world for me, they are someone, or a part of that brain trust is someone who understands South Florida football, Miami, the legacy of the Miami Dolphins, right? Because for a really long time, when Ross bought the team, there's a lot of pursuit of the Joe Philbin hire was want to bring back the high flying Dan Marino aerial attack, right? But that's not what made the Dolphins a great organization. There's a common thread, I think, for the Panthers now, the Heat, the Shula Dolphins. The common thread between all of those teams, and I think this community's fan base understands this. There is a grittiness, a toughness, a physicality element to those football teams and those basketball teams and those hockey teams that is a common thread for greatness. And you think about the Miami Hurricanes in their prime, they were stacked with talent, but they were tough, right? And I'm not saying this needs to be a Stone Age approach to the game of football and 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and we're going to put 8 men on the line of scrimmage, and we're going to play a bear front, a 4-4 defensive front. That's not what I'm talking about. It's up here. It's the psychology. It's the psychology of it all. And I think that's something that the vast majority, with the exception of the hire of Brian Flores, but you didn't have the full picture correct. So there weren't agreements on what the organization and what the team needed to look like from the very beginning that took root, and it created a divide, and it split what could have been a promising group. But it has to start at the top. And the fact that the hires that had been made since Jeff Ireland was hired have generally been Band-Aids or short period stopgaps or internal hires. I think whoever is responsible for this operation, in a perfect world, they understand the commonality. Hey, we want high-flying football. No. We want to restore what the standard is of Miami Dolphins football. And that transcends whether you're running the ball or throwing the ball. It's the approach and the toughness. And you listen to some of the teams like the Detroit Lions of the world, right? They're very progressive as far as their X's and O's, but they are at their core a very nose to the grindstone type approach every single day. And what's the saying about the Dolphins with the guys who come down at the end of their career, and it's a little bit easier and it's not as intense. And that's not to, definitively say what the workload is or is not, right? But it's got to seep through every ounce of this organization, I think. That has to be part of the calculus to find the right people. And John Eric Sullivan was one of the GM candidates that I'm exploring for Miami. He's with the Packers. He's a vice president of player personnel there in Green Bay. He said it's a young man's game. And he said, when you've got young guys, you don't have to make concessions on the workload throughout the week so that we could practice with the intensity that we need to. And then you contrast that to a couple years ago, vet rest days. Guys not working throughout the week to get ready and ramping up, and then you're limited on Friday, and then some of that was out of necessity, but that's about the people that you brought into to the roster and how much they could handle based off where they were at their respective careers versus being young and hungry and driven and having something to prove and trusting your player evaluation ability and then developing those players once we get here. None of that happened the last 5 years. It's established NFL players. We want developmental players, but we can't develop them because we're changing too many things. And it's a black hole, right? So I don't know that Jason Taylor or Zach Thomas is the right person, but a part of my criteria for candidates that I'm exploring is I want to know, what do you understand about Miami Dolphin, the heritage of the Miami Dolphins football. What's made it great? What made the Don Shula, that's the formative standard for Dolphins fans, is not high-flying Dan Marino. Those years were fun. But it's the bedrock of Don Shula's approach. And I understand you can't do 4-a-days anymore because of the CBA, and I don't expect that to be the case. But how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that piece of it, and people who understand it and understand how it was necessary and what came from that common thread between Pat Riley's heritage with the Heat and what Paul Maurice has built with the Panthers and what Don Shula did with the Dolphins and what Jimmy Johnson did with the Canes. There's a thread there, and it's not speed or high-flying ability or fireworks or any of that. So I would love for a piece of whatever the new football operation brain trust is to understand Miami Dolphins' heritage and legacy and the standard, because the standard is, it's not the market is the market. The standard is the standard. And the standard in South Florida is the best of all time, Don Shula. And I think if you're going to successfully make and model a successful football team here in Miami, it's got to meet that standard for this fan base to really lean into it and embrace it. We're at a tight end transaction. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. There's no contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I said yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. That's something I can say yes to. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text. Delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same number in contacts. So if you're ready to say yes to saying no, make the switch to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 350 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for extra details. There is nothing better than being at the stadium to check out the game. NFL season is back. Get your tickets without the queues, the login screens, the prices at checkout. Take the frustration out of ticket buying and get your tickets through Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price. All fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I also love that they have panoramic views, so there's no surprises. When you get there, you sit in your seat, you know exactly what you're signing yourself up for sightlines. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. I felt like a genie at the end of Aladdin, where the cuffs come off. Dolphins put out the post. We have released tight end Tanner Conner. And you don't want to get excited about a guy getting cut off the team, right? Like you have the understanding for the human element. But what this was for me was more than just, I don't have to watch Tanner Conner try to play tight end this week for the Dolphins. It was, Tanner Conner's been a part of this ride because he has been in-house, and the position he plays is one with a lot of complexities. You know, there's a lot of layers to shifts and motions and alignment, and that felt like it was his saving grace, especially this year, where the tight end room had a banged up Darren Waller, so that's a lease on life for you. Greg Dulcich was a late add. They didn't really do anything else. They move on from Jonnu Smith. And Tanner Conner was kind of the leftover who's front row center and say, you've been here for 3 years. We've developed you. This is your 4th year. You know the offensive system inside and out. What did we say at the beginning of the year that this season was going to be about for the Miami Dolphins? Coaching and player development. Coaching, We got some pros and cons. Player development, I think we got a big black eye in the specific case of Tanner Connor, who this team was tied to for a really long time. And I understand from a coach's perspective, you've got guys who you see it in the film room, you see the work that they put in, you see the ability to apply critical thinking and have the right answers and install. But at the end of the day, if you can't go out and execute on game day, that's all there is to it. And I watched Greg Dulcich come in his first game active and showcase 3 attempts of better ball skills, extending away from his frame to reach back and protect the football at the catch point, adjust his body at the catch point, quickly get his shoulder pads upfield, create yardage after the catch, make plays, be a quarterback-friendly target. Then I saw from Tanner Connor. I saw more from Greg Dulcich in his first 4 targets than I saw for Tanner Connor in his first 4 years. So obviously Greg Dulcich with Darren Waller on injured reserve, Dulcich being a former top 100 pick, you see the talent. It's very obvious. I think that's a good development for the Dolphins in their roster because that's a player long-term you're going to have a chance to retain and explore. And maybe he's a depth player for you at tight end. I don't think you put all your eggs in that basket, not until he's got several years worth of sweat equity, but you got dibs on doing that. I think that's a good thing. I'll be interested to see from Tanner Connor. I would suspect he's probably going to be back on the practice squad. I would suspect the subsequent move here for Miami is somebody's coming up off the practice squad, whether that's Hayden Rusi because Julian Hill's going to miss another game and you're getting low on elevations in that regard. Or maybe it's Quentin Bell because Chop Robinson's in concussion protocol still. Doesn't sound like he's going to be able to go this week against the Bills. So I suspect part of this is a numbers game for Tanner Connor. But my challenge for Miami is don't give the spot back. I don't think there's another 53-man roster in the NFL that Tanner Connor would be on. And I don't say that to be like cruel, but it's the evaluation element of the player and the league and the how teams covet the 53-man roster spots, right? And their hands are kind of tied here with the edge rush situation with trading Jalen Phillips, who was so kind as to give us the soundbite that getting traded to Philadelphia was the greatest thing that's ever happened to him in his life yesterday. I saw the headline and thought, oh, okay, it's another one of those AI things. No, he actually said it. So that sucks. Still wish the best for JP, but was not fun to read or to listen to yesterday. And getting traded from Miami, greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. So go ahead, okay. Your hands are kind of tied with, from a personnel standpoint, especially if Julian Hill can't go. Now, I believe they have one more opportunity because they first put Brunskill on the jumbo set because Hill couldn't go against the Falcons and then the Ravens. So I suspect there's another injury that's facilitated this move. But based off of what Greg Dulcich did with his reps and opportunities, I don't want that spot to go back to Tanner Connor at some point. I think that would be a mistake. And I appreciate it from the sense of kind of probably disproportionately tethered and tied to this player and overly invested in this player who has not warranted the investment with the body of work since after his undrafted rookie free agent season. You got to, if you're Champ Kelly, your ability to present value at this stage for the Dolphins is to churn the bottom of the roster. I would hope there's several turnovers in the bottom 5 spots on the 53-man every week. We got to start churning. We got to find a few guys to catch some lightning in a bottle that are on cheap rookie contracts or cheap contracts to potentially be here. That's for Champ Kelly. If you want to present value now that the trade deadline has passed, that's where you're going to do that. We're at the start of a monumental window for the Dolphins. We're going to get into that next here, Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. This episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It can take less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere. that Prize Picks operates. I love their stacks feature. It's a game changer. You can now put more on, for example, Steph Curry, points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup is played. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. All right. Big window we're getting into here because we're in mock draft season. It's the inevitability of being 2-7 and conversations around the coach and conversations around the quarterback and what that all looks like. There's a window here where we're living through games and evaluating players through games without expecting to win games. And it creates kind of this deflated state of existence unless you can tether it into some conversations about what the future might look like and who getting a head start on some of those decisions, right? But we're at the start of what is a critical about 60-day window where the college prospects are going to start to be declaring themselves for the NFL draft. And there's several quarterback prospects of interest that have additional eligibility. Will they come out? Will they go back to school? We're going to have to start keeping tabs on this because there's a world in which enough quarterbacks come out that I like off of their body of work this season that I would say, if you're assuming you're picking where the Dolphins are projected to pick right now, which is in the top 5, I would think it would be advantageous to take advantage of picking in that position to pick one of several quarterbacks that I really like. But if Ty Simpson from Alabama goes back to school, if Dante Moore from Oregon goes back to school, I expect Fernando Mendoza is going to come out. But to guarantee yourself that one, you got to be picking first because that would only be one quarterback. And he technically has another year of eligibility, but I expect he's going to be in this year's class. But names like Allar and Carson Beck and Garrett Nussmeier, I like Garrett Nussmeier's tape, but there's a ceiling calculus with Nussmeier that I don't get super excited about. So I say all that to say the state of affairs of this year's quarterback class is going to be really fascinating to watch because the domino effect there is what blue chip position player talents exist if you were to go that direction instead. And then what's your plan at quarterback for the upcoming year in 2026, which is the Tua bridge year with the guarantees if you don't have an opportunity to pick up a quarterback. And what does that dynamic do for your ability to hire the coach that you want or the GM that you want if you keep the head coach? So there's a lot hanging on the balance. And I think with the this new NIL era of college football, it's very easy to project all these kids to go back, right? Because there's money to be had there now, and it's not money you have to get in a paper bag under the table, right? It's a formal part of the business of college football now, and I would be surprised if a few of these quarterbacks that aren't playing well don't heed some of the lesson from a name that we just mentioned, Drew Allar from Penn State, who decided he was going back to school, and then Penn State kind of makes a college football playoff run. And then it was like, well, wait, hold on. He might change his mind here, and he might declare and come out before the deadline, which is sometime in the first half of January. But then Penn State loses to Notre Dame. They kind of rally the troops and bring everybody back for another year. Allar didn't play well for the first half of the season. Then he went down with a broken leg, and it ended his Penn State career. And had he been in last year's class, he'd have been right up there with Jackson Dart in that conversation, probably as a first-round pick at quarterback. I think he had that kind of momentum with how he played down the stretch. But he needed the big game, the hallmark game. It was like the Justin Herbert in the Rose Bowl last year was kind of like the icing on the cake to say, okay, we're a little bit more comfortable with some of the questions that we have. I'm not comparing Drew Allar to Justin Herbert, but it was a part of that pre-draft process and conversation that I think helped tilt, in addition to having unfinished business at Penn State, pull Drew Allar back for another year. And you feel better about it because of NIL, but where's Drew Allar going to get drafted now? Off of a down season in the first half of the year and missing the second half of the year. with a broken leg. And are you able to do all your pre-draft testing? What kind of health are you going to have for that? If the answer is no, it just creates that much more of kind of a uncomfortable draft profile for a guy who, if he came out when his stock was at its highest, still would have gone in the first round. And that short-term NIL money is a nice catch can. But if you go from a first-round pick at quarterback to a day 3 pick at quarterback because you don't play well and then get hurt, I promise you your 5-year earnings rolling income is going to be lower than what it would have been if you came into the league. So keep an eye out for declarations. I don't expect you'll get a ton of them for the quarterbacks in the playoff hunt. So does Alabama make the college football playoff? If Alabama misses the college football playoff, it could set the stage for us to know, okay, there's another name in or out. Right? I don't expect South Carolina to make the college football playoff by any means, unless a whole bunch of teams fold up shop and no longer are playing this year. But Lenore Sellers, who's the very gifted quarterback there at South Carolina, sounds like the overwhelming expectation is he's going to be coming back to school. But like we could get that formal announcement at any point now, right? These games, some of these college teams only have 2-3 games left this season. So keep your eyes peeled, and we'll be talking about who's officially in on the class and what it changes and doesn't change for a Dolphins team that has some monumental decisions awaiting it. But it all starts up at the top with who's running your football operation. And I think this has a chance to be the legacy-defining decision for team owner Stephen Ross, because we're committed to making this decision, and this is the monumental decision. It's the first time we've had this decision in a decade under Stephen Ross. Right? Jeff Ireland was there. Last time we went through the hiring process, externally, it landed on Dennis Hickey. I understand why you might be a little leery about getting back into this hiring process if you got Dennis Hickey and then you had to move on from Dennis Hickey and promote from within and bring in Mike Tannenbaum, who you had a relationship with. But we need new blood at the top, a new mindset at the top. And we need it to, in a perfect world, come with an understanding and the brand of football that this organization needs to connect with its fan base, to restore the legacy of what this franchise has been about, going all the way back to 1970 when they hired Don Shula in the first place. That's going to do it for us here today on the show, Kyle Krabs. Keep it locked in here, Locked On Dolphins. Appreciate you guys as always for checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I am out of here. Go Fins. And I'll talk to you on the squad show after Miami's Week 10 contest against Buffalo Bills.